fasting actually changes our spiritual DNA. When we fast, our spiritual senses get upgraded. Extended periods of fasting create new spiritual pathways that let us operate with greater discernment and spiritual authority, even after the fast is over. Many of my children see fasting as a way to get me to do something, Jesus explained. But fasting isn't about convincing me, it's about positioning yourself to partner with what I'm already wanting to do. When you fast, you tune your spiritual frequency to heaven's frequency. What Jesus showed me next was intense. I saw believers who were fasting, and they looked like they were wearing extra spiritual armor. Their prayers during fasting were like precise spiritual weapons, hitting their targets with increased accuracy and power. But there was a warning too. The enemy specifically targets people during fasting because he knows its power. Protection during fasting is crucial, Jesus said. Stay under the cover of my blood and my word. Don't fast in your own strength. Then Jesus showed me how fasting relates to spiritual authority. Each day of sincere fasting increased a believer's spiritual authority in prayer and warfare. It was like watching someone get promoted in heaven's army. Their words carried more weight, and their prayers had greater impact. Remember, Jesus said, this authority isn't earned, it's granted. Fasting positions you to carry greater authority, but the authority itself comes from me. One of the most beautiful things Jesus showed me was how fasting affects worship. During times of fasting, our worship carried a special fragrance in heaven. The sacrifice of fasting added something precious to our prayers and praise. When my children worship while fasting, Jesus explained, it creates a unique harmony with heaven's worship. Then he showed me something that made me understand why he'd called me to fast for my brother Josh. I saw how fasting breaks dark chains in the spiritual realm. These chains represented addictions, generational curses, spiritual oppression. When someone fasts and prays with faith and pure motives, these chains begin to weaken and break. For a second, I just cried. I realized God had been preparing me to fight for my brother in a way I never knew was possible. But then Jesus showed me something that brought me to tears again. Our fasting partners with his ongoing ministry of intercession. When we fast, we join him in his work in a special way, and this partnership brought him joy, actual joy. Katie, he said, when my children fast with pure hearts, it moves my heart. It's not about earning my love. You already have that fully. It's about partnering with my purposes in deeper ways. Jesus showed me how fasting creates spiritual bridges. These bridges connected different aspects of God's work, creating highways for his power to flow. Sometimes our fasting creates connections that God uses long after our fast is over. He showed me how fasting affects our spiritual inheritance too. As we fast, we clear away debris from wells of spiritual inheritance, letting those ancient springs flow again. Some people's fasting restores access to spiritual blessings that have been blocked for generations. Then Jesus showed me something about fasting and spiritual multiplication. When we fast with pure hearts, God often multiplies the spiritual impact beyond what we could imagine. One person's faithful fasting could affect an entire community, creating ripple effects that continue for generations. The spiritual impact of fasting often goes far beyond what you can see, Jesus explained.
Big Pharma wants you to take pills for fungus. This fighter chose a better way. Hey man, I'm not rolling with you if your toenails look like that. No offense. That's what my MMA sparring partner told me one night at the gym. I've been doing mixed martial arts for years now, but lately my toenail fungus had gotten so bad, my nails, they looked like they were literally decaying. And I've been wrestling with this disgusting fungus for almost like 3 years. Probably from the gym locker room, honestly. People were flat out refusing to grab.
Sometimes the greatest fruit of your fasting will only be seen in eternity. He showed me how fasting relates to spiritual timing too. Sometimes God calls us to fast not for immediate breakthrough, but to prepare us for something he knows is coming. Fasting strengthens people spiritually before they even know they'll need that strength. In the times ahead, Jesus said, many of my children will need to learn to fast preemptively, not just in response to crisis, but in preparation for what I know is coming. As my time in heaven was ending, Jesus gave me one final understanding. We're entering times where understanding the power of fasting will be more important than ever. God is calling his people back to biblical fasting as preparation for the days ahead. Tell them what you've seen, Jesus commanded. Tell them that I'm calling my church back to biblical fasting. The time is short, and my people need to understand these truths. Just before everything began to fade, Jesus looked at me with such love that it felt like my spirit would burst. Remember, he said, the power isn't in the fasting itself, the power is in me. Fasting positions you to partner with what I'm already wanting to do. The next thing I knew, I was back in my body in the hospital. The medical staff couldn't believe what they were seeing. Not only had I come back to life after being dead for over 17 minutes, but I had no brain damage or lasting effects from the trauma. The doctors called it a miracle. They were right, but they didn't know half of it. 3 months later, something even more incredible happened. I was in my bedroom, praying and fasting again, this time for 7 days. I wasn't in an accident this time. The doctors said I had an unexplained cardiac event. My heart stopped for 4 minutes and 12 seconds, but in those precious moments I was transported back to that realm of living light. Jesus was there again, his presence just as overwhelming as before. But this time, he seemed more like a friend eager to share a precious secret. Katie, he said, I've brought you back to show you the fruit of what you've learned. Suddenly, I was shown a view of the spiritual impact that had occurred since I began sharing my testimony about fasting. I saw streams of light multiplying across the earth. Each light represented someone who had begun to understand and practice biblical fasting after hearing what Jesus had shown me. Watch, he said, and I saw people's lives changing, addictions breaking, healing happening, relationships being restored, all through the combined power of prayer and biblical fasting. What touched me most was seeing the intimate moments between these people and Jesus during their fasts. Each sacrifice of food had created special space for deep communion with him. Do you see? Jesus asked. What I showed you wasn't just for you, it was for my beloved church. Every truth you've shared has planted seeds that are now bearing fruit. Then he showed me something that made me cry again. Every time someone applied these truths about fasting in their life, it created a ripple effect that impacted not just their life, but generations to come. These ripples were creating waves of revival, preparing the way for something greater. The days ahead, Jesus said, will require my people to walk in levels of spiritual authority they've never known before. What I showed you about fasting isn't optional. It's essential preparation for what's coming. He revealed how the corporate understanding of fasting was creating a new spiritual dynamic in his church. As more believers began to understand and practice biblical fasting, their combined spiritual authority was pushing back darkness in ways never seen before. Tell them again, Jesus said, but this time tell them with the authority of one who has seen the fruit. Tell them that I'm calling my church back to biblical fasting, not as a religious duty, but as preparation for the greatest outpouring of my Spirit they've ever seen. Just before everything faded, Jesus gave me one final message. Tell them that I'm not calling them to fasting to earn my love. They already have that completely. I'm calling them to fasting because I want to entrust them with my power. The darkness is increasing, but through prayer and fasting, my light in them will shine brighter still. When I returned to my body this second time, I knew with even greater certainty why God had allowed me to see these things. This second experience left me with an even deeper conviction. Jesus is calling his church to rediscover the power of biblical fasting, not as a way to manipulate God or earn his favor, but as a means of positioning ourselves to partner with heaven in these crucial times. My brother Josh, he's been clean for 8 months now. The breakthrough came